The treatment of children in Indian residential schools is a sad chapter in our history. Two primary objectives of the residential school system were to remove and isolate children from the influence of their home, families, traditions, and cultures, and to assimilate them into the dominant culture. These objectives were based on the assumption that Aboriginal cultures and spiritual beliefs were inferior and unequal. Indeed, some sought, as was infamously said, to kill the Indian in the child. The government of Canada built an educational system in which very young children were often forcibly removed from their homes, often taken far from their communities. Many were inadequately fed, clothed, and housed. All were deprived of the care and nurturing of their parents, grandparents, and communities. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis languages and cultural practices were prohibited in these schools. Tragically, some of these children died while attending residential schools. By tragic accounts of the emotional, physical, and sexual abuse and neglect of helpless children, and their separation from powerless families and communities. Not only did you suffer these abuses as children, but as you became parents, you were powerless to protect your own children from suffering the same experience.
We took away your children. I am sorry we did not value you.
This Parliament chose to treat First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people as not equally human.
My story begins with all the heartaches, the turmoil that myself, my children, my grandchildren have had to go through in these past years. A lot of it has to do with the children being apprehended, with us being placed in residential schools, with us being ripped from our homes as children, and now my grandchildren. My children went through it, and now my grandchildren are going through it. 3 generations of us having been taken from our homes. Her baby was just newborn. She was breastfeeding at the time they ripped the child from her arms. And we're not even whole anymore. I'm not whole. I don't feel whole. And I have to try and be strong for all my children, plus my grandchildren. Somebody's going to hear our prayers. Somebody's going to be there. We could reach out to you and they're going to say, hey, we can help you. That's what I'm like.
That was ministry, get my daughter back, and I got her back. And I wouldn't let them in my house again. Like, they try to come and say, oh, we heard this and that. This is just, leave us alone. I told my sister, you gotta stand up for what's yours, and your children are yours. They gotta come back to you, you know, they're suffering.
Front line. Because of the apprehensions of her children. And that is why we're in the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, process today.
I don't know. I don't know what to say. I want my kids home. I want my home back. I want my life back. I was going to school to be a child. I don't know. Yeah, I was. I had no right taking my kids. I went to go get diapers for my kids at 9 or 10 or something. My dad was going to work and we ended up getting locked out because the security guard locked the doors.
How could you do that to a child? Leave him in a car seat and make him piss himself? The way they were manhandling everyone, like they were just like moving you and forcing the kids in the seat. And, it was like all chaos. Like they get to the house at night, and the dumb lady didn't even stop anyone and feed them. And by the time they got to the foster place, it was like 10:30 at night. He has problems, and they're trying to say our kids are FAS. And it's just like, that's why she gets $1,000, right, for each kid. FAS, FAS, FAS. And you say all her kids.
We are saying to them, we have the right to decide for ourselves and our children how we are going to live. But they just say, James or somebody, they say to us, you're crazy.
My Ukomilch's name is Tatwa. People look at Canada as being a nice place to live, but it is not a nice place to live because of our people and what our people have suffered. It's still today happening. I do not trust the Canadian system for what they've done to me. Not only to myself, but to my people. Watching my dad not wanting to speak our language to us. My grandmother saying that why do you want to learn this? Why do you want to learn your language? She was very ashamed. And it has made me that way today in some way. It's so sad when I look at the young people and what they're doing today. Among the highest suicide rate. They took my child when she was 6 months old and removed her from my place. I did not know where she was. I feel a lot of loneliness, disappointment with myself, suicide. I feel a lot of pain. I don't want to live under this Canadian system anymore. It's just brought in our people, divided our people, brought in chaos into our lives and how we used to live. It's just very unfair.
Oh, my name is John Williams. I'm from the Lil'wat Nation. We're a non-treaty nation. When I was 5 years old, they shipped me off, or 6 years old, they shipped me off to the Indian residential school. Wondered why we had to give names like John or Mary or Joseph or Matt. Started to give our own names, like Meshach, Gael, Peter. A lot of trouble with the government because they wouldn't accept the names that we given to our children. They said it was illegal, that they had to have a Christian name. Like we look at the apprehension of children that the province is doing now is just an extension of what happened in the residential schools. Only it's got more sophisticated. Of all the things that have happened to the Native people, like the genocide, the ethnocide, the theft of land and resources, it still goes on today. Like we're non-treaty, and Canada doesn't have jurisdiction in our nation. They never did. They only assumed it. Where's the red man's face in the world community? We don't need non-natives to show us how to live. We can live the way we always
If we're to survive, we can do it without the Canadian government. Some of my children aren't registered. They're not Canadians. They're not registered Canadians. Yeah, they're Lil'wats. So for those, we have to pay everything. We have to pay the medical bills. like every time they go see a doctor, or every time they go to a dentist, or we have to pay cash for that. It gets pretty scary at times. Like my wife was teaching, and I told her I don't want our children to be in that education system. I said, I want them out of that. I said, we'll teach them the basics, and that's it. And everything else around, they will learn to live in Lil'wat. I says, if they can master that, they can live anywhere.
My children were born at home, and that's where I plan to raise them, because that's where our people come from for thousands of years. My grandmother, who's originally from Chachlip, but since moved to Chalav, also had her children at Shkilt Mountain in Chalav. We chose not to have any sort of birth certificate. We don't recognize the authority that the government claims to have over our territory. We're free people, we're Slethian people, we have always been free. I don't feel that there's any restrictions to anybody that doesn't register their children, because this land is Slethian territory, and we will always stand up for the land. It's in our blood, it's been handed down for thousands of years, and the only restrictions I see is to them, because I don't welcome any kind of foreign government system that's out to kill our people and hurt our elders and take away our children. So I feel like the only restriction is our restriction against them, is that we won't stand for it anymore. Learning how to stop these corporations from illegally stealing our trees, from illegally tearing up the ground, and illegally gaining billions of dollars from our resources. And I'm not saying by any means that we want a part of the money. I'm not saying we want more jobs. I'm not saying we want to be a part of the bargain. I'm saying that I don't want these companies to exist in our territories anymore. I can't even take my children to the rocks and show them all the abundance of salmon anymore because of all the pollution in the city, all the destruction to the land, everything that leads up to where we live on the river. All the destruction along the river is stopping our salmon from coming up to feed us. We pray for the salmon and we give thanks for the salmon. We honor the Creator for putting the salmon on the earth, but look what man is doing. Man is just deliberately destroying our resources, our food, our nourishment, our spiritual well-being. So I do see a big change.
Treaty negotiations, self-government agreements, and child apprehension are the biggest issues that plague our peoples today. Our people in our tribal lands in the area commonly known through assumed jurisdiction of British Columbia, Canada, has never been surrendered, sold, given away, nor signed any treaty. Knowing that the company called Canada purchased the trading rights of Rupert's Land from the Hudson Bay Trading Company for £300,000, administered by the Crown in Chancery of London to do business with the Indians on that day, December 1st, 1869. The area was transferred to Canada to do trade. To this day, all Canada has ever done was rape, molest, sterilize, infect, steal, and kill our children, and enforce them to be bonded and registered as Canadians to do business with Canada, calling it a benefit to be taxed. And if that's not enough, they rape, molest, steal, and infect our Mother Earth in where we live. Statistically speaking, Indigenous peoples, according to British Columbia Injury and Unit, my people suffer a higher rate of injury, death, and hospitalization. Between 1992 to 2002, 27% of Indian children and youth who died were killed by suicide. According to the report, Indigenous peoples are the most statistically documented group of peoples in Canada. Through all the genocide, our tribal peoples have scarcely maintained our language, culture, and way of life. Our own peoples, through enforced registration, become employees of incorporated companies called Indian bands, registered in Canada Incorporated, have taken on the roles as dictators over our peoples, defined as registered Indians, to the Indian Act system, to enforce Canada's policies of enforced genocide. Coming to acknowledge the Sea of Commerce under Maritime Admiralty jurisdiction, it is all about an oath of an allegiance, oath of appointment, oath of secrecy, and an oath of office, applying a tax on all things. In law, everything is about acceptance, and through contracts and agreements, it is all based on trust. The Crown has breached all trust in which Canada represents. Every day is a learning experience. We know our time is short, and to bring forth our statement and ask that we may work together as the eagle meets the condor is at hand. In the prophecies of our peoples, we know this time was coming. As the Hopi elders have stated, we are the ones we've been waiting for. We must gather ourselves in celebration. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gracias.
Ethnocide as a direct result of colonial corporate activity within Lil'wat and Kakwa tribal lands. The corporate founders of BC arrived to establish a state system that changed Indigenous way of life, creating a dependency on the colonial corporate states. This dependency weakens sovereignty, and weakness leads to child apprehensions, to further weaken the original people and creates abject poverty. This alone has created an internalized oppression that is carried on from one generation to the next. Where a once strong and independent, distinct peoples were forced to submit through a rough dogmatic assimilation tactics, our rights to land, air, and water were restricted, natural foods diminished, and holistic medicines depleted, and are creating a trend of commercialization of our precious remedies of our ancestors, promoting monetary gain while our lands are being exploited, raped, and pillaged. This state control usurps sovereignty, further weakened through enforced assimilation that restrict how we can use scarce allocated funds, creating chronic funding shortfalls that lead to desperation by corporate elected chiefs and councils, who are willing to do anything to try to make funding shortfalls, therefore falling into the corporate traps, starving our people into submission to the corporate systems, while our land, air, and water are compromised and put at risk, compromising our sovereignty. This result is called creeping extinguishment, or simply ethnocide. Lil'wat has their own natural laws. In Clackman, which was strictly enforced through a way of life's training and discipline. These were all done through ceremony and engaging into the natural beauty of the land, air, and waterways that shaped and honed the gifts of each individual to live their life's purpose. The land is our garden, the water is our life, air and fire is our healing. Now the eagle meets the condor, and healing of Turtle Island is in motion. We stand together united, our hearts beating to the same drum. We dance to the same rhythm of the land, and pray to the same sun gods and moon goddesses. We will join together and lead the way into a new world of love, healing, and unity.